Hi everybody, my name is Arthur and today I'm going to show you how we can create a space shooter game on PixelPAD. PixelPAD is a free website that allows you to create games coding in Python, and it's very simple to use. So once you log in on PixelPAD, you'll be redirected to this page. This is a tutorials page that you can take a look here if you find it interesting. But we don't need any tutorial to start coding our game. We just need to come here on the left on My Apps. And once you come to My Apps, you'll find this button here, Create a New App. So let's click on it. And here we have some information that we can add to our game to start coding it. So first we have here the app thumbnail. That would be an image. If you want to upload an image, just click here and choose File and choose a file from your computer. And we have here the app name. That is going to be our game name. So I'll call mine Space Shooter, like that. And you can add an app description as well if you feel like. The app engine that we're going to use today is the PixelPAD 2D, so we just leave it like that and press create. And we'll be redirected to this page here on PixelPAD. And this is the page where we will be coding our game. So let's first understand this page here, this environment, right? So first here on the left side, we have everything that we're gonna use in our game. So for example, classes are basically behaviors. We're gonna tell the game how each thing in our game behaves. So for example, how the player behaves, how the power-up behaves, how the enemy behave. The rooms are basically different screens for your game. So think on Pokemon, for example. When you enter in a house, it changes the screen, you have a transition. Those are different rooms. Sprites are basically images. Any image that we're gonna use in the game, we're gonna call it as a sprite. Sounds are sounds, music, sound effects. And functions, I'm not gonna cover it on this tutorial, but they're basically blocks of codes that if you know how to use them well and properly, they help you a lot. But don't worry with that now. So here in the middle now, we have the coding window where we can add our code here. So you can see that I can type there in the middle, and you can also see that this window here has two tabs, has the start tab and the loop tab, and they are different. If I type something on the loop tab, it doesn't stay there when I change to the start tab, and the same the other way around, right? If I type something on the start tab, it doesn't stay when I change to the loop tab. So they are different. How are they different? Well, the start tab will run the code inside here just once when I press play in my game, or when the class is created inside my game. You understand more about that later. The loop tab keeps happening all the time. It never stops. It's a loop, right? A loop never stops. And the loop runs this code inside this window around 60 times per second. So it's very fast as well. And how can we use these two windows to code our game? Well, we'll see that later. And here on the right side now, we have the game window. So here we have the most important feature of PixelPAD, where you can save your game, save your progress. Any change that you make in your game, you want to press this button here. Otherwise, when you leave this page and come back, your game will not be saved. So make sure you press save. And here we have the play button that when I press it, it becomes the stop button, and we can just play and stop our game. One thing is just like when we add any code and you want to see what changed in your game, you have to stop and play your game if your game is playing already, right? And down here, we have the console window. The console tells us if there's something weird in our code, if there's something wrong in our code. So let's say here, if I come here on the Start tab and I type ABC, for example, and try to play my game, it'll give me an error. It says that ABC is not defined in game loop online 0. So it tells you more or less where the error is. I'm not on game loop, I'm on start. But it tells me the line and it tells me what is wrong. It doesn't know what ABC is because ABC is not a code line. So we cannot just type random stuff here, right? Cool. So now that we understood how PixelPAD works, let's start coding our game. What is the first step? What do we have to do first? So let's start adding our player inside the game. And to add something inside the game, we will always need a class for that. So let me add a new class here. How can I add a new class? So you can see here, beside class, I have the plus button, and I just click on it, and I can choose a name for my class. And usually we choose the name that will represent this class. So if I'm creating my player now, I'll name this class player. And by convention, we usually start the class with an uppercase letter. So don't forget about that as well. So player, uppercase P, press OK. And now I have my player class created here. So if I press play my game now, you can see that I still have a black screen. That means that I don't have anything on my game yet. So but what is happening? I created my player, right? So why is my player not on the game? Because you can see here that on the game class, start tab, loop tab, I don't have anything inside my game. So let me add this player inside my game now. How can I do that? I can say here on the game class, start tab, I can start typing my first code line, and I can say game dot player. So the player inside my game equals a new object. What is a new object? So every time that we're gonna create something inside the game, as I said before, it becomes a class. And once we take this class and throw it inside the game, this class becomes an object. So that's why I have to say new object, and then I have to use brackets here and quotes. And inside these quotes, I have to say which class am I going to create inside the game. So I'm going to create my class player, right? So my player inside the game is a new object from the class player. Now, save my game. If I stop and play my game, I can see a blue square in the middle of my screen already. And the blue square represents my player. But what is that blue square? Where is my player? Where's my spaceship, right? Well, my player doesn't have a sprite yet. It's just an object. It's just there. It doesn't have a sprite. It doesn't have an image, right? So let's give a sprite to this player. But first, we have to add a sprite here on the sprite section so we can use it. So let's look for an image here, for an sprite to use as our player. So besides sprite here, I'll go click on the plus button, and I'll navigate here on the asset store looking for a cool spaceship that I can use. So we have this blue spaceship. Let me see more here. The green spaceship. I like better the orange spaceship. This one I like better. You can choose any one you want. I'll go with the orange spaceship. So I'll just click on it and press select asset. Now, once I press select asset, it will ask me for the name of this sprite. And again, we will give a name that represents this sprite, right? So this is my player. Now, lowercase is fine. We don't have to use uppercase here. Press OK. So now that we have my player sprite here on PixelPAD, let's add this sprite to the player object here, right? How can I do that? I can just say here on the next line that my game.player.sprite, so the sprite of my player inside the game is a new sprite. So to create a new object, we say new object, and to add the new sprite, we say new sprite. So is a new sprite with the name. Well, let's try just player, right? Because I named my sprite as player. So if I just type player and try pressing play, the console will give me an error. It says that it doesn't have a texture called something on line 3. Well, it's not exactly on line 3, but I know that this is the problem because without this line, my game was working fine, right? So it's saying that it doesn't know what player is because player is not the name of my sprite. The name of my sprite is player.png. So I have to include here the .png. And now when I press play, I have my spaceship inside my game. But we cannot move the spaceship yet, right? Yeah, we haven't coded it. So let's start coding the movement for the spaceship now. Now, on my game, I'll go to the loop tab because the movement is something that we have to keep doing again and again and again. We don't do it just once when we start the game, right? So here on the loop tab, I have to check for when the player or when the person who is playing my game presses a key on the keyboard, right? So let's say we're gonna move with W, A, S, and D. So when the player press D, for example, our spaceship has to move to the right side, right? So how can we do that? Well, if we're checking for keys, if we're checking something, we use if. if is a condition, right? So you're looking for something. What are you looking for? So if key is pressed, okay, if my key is pressed, which key? So I use brackets, quotes, and I tell which key. I say the D key. So when my D key is pressed, then we have to include this column here to represent the then. And on the next line, I have to say what happens when I press the D key. But first we have to understand how our game works, okay? And this is basically how our game works, right? So this black rectangle here is our game screen. And you can see that my spaceship was created right in the middle, right? So if I go back here on the game, you can see that my spaceship is created right in the middle. So what does that mean? That means that when I create my spaceship, it creates my spaceship for me on the position 0, 0. And what does that mean? That means 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. What are those axes? So you can see here these two arrows, right? One is the x and the other one is the y. And what does that mean? So let's say I want to move my player to the right. That's what we are trying to do, right? If I want to move my player to the right, do I have to change my y-axis or my x-axis? So you can see that my arrow to move right is way more similar to the x arrow than to the y arrow, right? So this, I would move the x-axis, right? Now, do I have to increase or decrease my x? Well, my arrow is pointing to the same way as the x arrow, so that's a plus. I increase my x. That means that if I go to the left, I still change the x only, and now I have to decrease if I'm going to the left, right? If I'm going up, now I have to change my y-axis, because up and down is y, and my arrow looks like the same as the y arrow, so that's a plus. So I increase my y if I'm moving up, and if I'm moving down, I also change the y, and I decrease my y, right? Because the arrows points to different ways. How can we use that now on our game to make our spaceship to move? So let's go back there on my game. If keys press D, I have to move my spaceship to the right, right? How can I do that? So if I want to change my spaceship X position and increase my X position, I can just say that my game.player.x, so the X position of my player inside the game will be equals my game.player.x plus 1. So you can see that if my X position here was 0, now it will be 0 plus 1. So that means 1. And you know that the loop keeps running, right? So if I keep pressing the D, it will keep counting. So it was 1, and now it's 2. It was 2, now it's 3. It was 3, now it's 4. So let's see if that works. If I stop and play my game, press D, and now my spaceship's moving to the right. I press A, I still not moving to the left. Of course, we haven't coded, right? So let's keep coding here. So now, if key is pressed and the key that we want to look for, A, now I want to move my player to the left, right? So let's check there, the drawing again. The left, x minus. So here you can see that moving to the right, we do x plus, right? So if we have to do x minus, we can just say the same thing here. Game player x equals game player x minus 1 this time, right? Because we're moving to the left, x minus. So if I press play, press A, I move to the left, and press D, I move to the right. Good. Now let's do up and down. So up, we're gonna use the W key. So key is pressed, brackets, quotes, W. Then now let's check there again. I'm moving up. Now I have to change the y-axis and it's a plus. Okay, so if I have to change the y-axis and it's a plus, first I have to change all the x to y's. So I can just say game.player.y equals game.player.y, and it has to be plus, right? So plus 1. If I press play, press W, I'm moving up now. And to move down, if key is pressed S, then game.player.y equals game.player.y minus 1. Press play, and now we have the player moving in the 4 directions. So now let's see what happens if I change those numbers here. I'm using ones, right? Let me try to use 5 now, all of those places. There. If I stop and play my game, I can see that my spaceship is moving way faster, right? Of course, because before we were moving 1 pixel when we press the D key per loop, right? And now we are moving 5, so we are 5 times faster. So I can say that this number here is basically my player speed, right? But you can see that it's very, very bad. If I want to change my speed, I have to come here on the game, loop tab, and then I change each number like that. And if I forget 1, for example, if I had forgotten 1 here instead of the 6, if I play my game won't work as expected. You can see that it's very hard for me to go up, right? So it's very bad to have the same values on different places like this. And what we want to do is to make all these values be located in the same place. And what do I mean with that? So let's go here on the game, on the Start tab. And here what we're gonna do, we're gonna create a variable for the player speed. And what is a variable? So let's go here on the paint and think on a variable like a box, right? Let me draw a beautiful box here like that. And this box has a label. In this case, the label of our box will be speed, right? And this label usually represents what this box is storing, right? So we're going to use the speed word for the label of this box. And inside of this box, we can store a number or something. We can store anything actually, right? But in our case, we're going to store a number for the speed. So I could store 6, I could store 5, I could store 100. It depends on what you want for your speed, right? And then later we can use this speed variable instead of the actual numbers. Let's see how that works. So let's go back to PixelPAD. And here, if I want to create a variable for my player, all that I have to do is to give a value to that variable. So I can just say game.player.speed equals 5. So I'm saying that the speed of my player inside the game is 5, right? That's what I'm saying. And here on the loop, now I want to change all those values for the speed of my player inside the game. So if I put here, for example, instead of 6, game.player.speed, when the game is running, this code here will go back there on the Start tab and check what's the value inside the game, the player speed, and then it will get 5. So here it will be counting as 5, and I can have the same thing here, game.player.speed, and here game.player.speed, and here game.player.speed. Now all of these places are looking to the same place, so they are all looking inside the speed variable inside the player, and they are all getting the same number. Now I stop and play my game. I can move my spaceship, and if I want to change my speed now, I don't change the number here on the loop anymore. I change here on the start tab, just one place, right? It's way easier. I can have 10, for example. I'll move way faster. I could have 100, but I think that would be way too fast. Oh yeah, see, I even lose my my spaceship. Cannot control it properly. I'll use 5 on mine. I think 5 is a good number. Yep, and there you go. We are just starting creating our spaceship game. We just coded the spaceship movement with a speed variable, and on the next video we're going to start coding the enemies. So that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video.